I'm I'm a professor of mechanical engineering, and I'm a part of a bigger team composed of Cal Poly, Purdue, and University of Texas, El Paso. We call our project the Success Project, and you can see the acronym in the upper corner there. And the original goal of our project, which started 5 years ago, was to try to understand what factors beyond intelligence or talent may be at play in ensuring student success, engineering student success. We've invested a lot of time and effort to help students learn topics and help them study better, but we have not given very much time to what we call the non-cognitive or affective factors that contribute to success. So that was the original goal of this project. And the way we chose to do this was to develop an instrument that could measure these non-cognitive affective factors. And we built this instrument looking at constructs in literature that had demonstrated evidence in predicting academic achievement. Usually that was grades or retention or, out of those constructs, we tested a bunch of them, and through confirmatory factor analysis, we ended up with 28 factors that were drawn from the constructs that are listed here in bold, and you can read them for yourself. So far, we've given this survey to over 3,000 undergraduate engineering students, and actually almost half of those are here at Cal Poly that have taken the survey. And when the pandemic hit, we kind of thought we had a lot of things that are in this survey that could actually tell us about what the students were experiencing during the pandemic. And let me tell you a little bit about what we've done with the survey, what we found. We first did a comparison just to see how well it can predict students' GPA. And we compared it in a head-to-head competition with the SAT scores. And what we found was that when we added SAT scores to demographics, that explained about 10% of the students' variance in GPA. And that's consistent with previous studies that have looked at the SAT. When we added our survey results to demographics, we were able to explain about 26% of the variance in GPA. So that gave us a lot of confidence that we're onto something, that these factors are actually quite important. And more importantly, most of these are malleable factors, so that we can, through interventions, modify these and help more students to succeed. We've also looked at clusters, using clustering to see if we could put students into certain clusters. And it turns out we can, and I won't talk about the results very much, but I'll show you the clusters that we have found. And you can see here that, don't worry about what they mean, but maybe pictorially, just to see that there are 4 distinct clusters. And I'll give you a brief tour. This cluster 2 has a lot of factors that are positive. So they're on the positive side compared to the average for the entire sample. And a lot of these factors suggest that they will be successful in their academic studies. And whereas clusters 3 and 4, they have a lot of factors that are on the negative side. And so these factors would predict that they might be struggling. And when we compare that to their GPAs, and we found that that was true, that the cluster membership does predict their GPA. And even more importantly, we found that cluster membership can predict the trajectory of their GPA. That is, the direction that their grades are changing over time. So I'll now talk about what we did for this study. And what we thought we could do with our survey instruments is to measure generally students' well-being. And specifically, we thought we'd look at stress and wellness. Well-being has been studied. There's a vast amount of research out there for studying well-being in the general population. And generally, the definition, the easiest definition is that people who are doing well and feeling good have a high sense of well-being. And in university and academic settings, we tend to focus on the doing well part, good grades, progress towards graduation. And only recently have we started really thinking about the feeling good part. And another way to conceptualize well-being is to think about the general definition, which is the pursuit of pleasures and the avoidance of suffering. And those generally speak to extrinsic factors. There's also a part that says everyone wants to actualize to their full potential. And that speaks to more intrinsic factors. And finally, when we think about well-being, we need to talk about the context in which it takes place. And in our case, we're talking about undergraduate engineering studies. And you know, I'm not proud to say we have a culture that is characterized by a lot of stress, a very heavy workload, and students that have expectations of lower grades compared to their peers. So it's not a very happy culture. I've heard it described as a culture of suffering and shared hardship. And when I saw that, I thought that was exactly what I experienced as an undergrad, and I think what many of our students experience now. So we have to take that into consideration as well. So in our case, when we think of the general definition of well-being and also this engineering context, we wanted to capture behavioral, cognitive, intrapersonal factors, as well as some social competencies to measure well-being. So based on previous work in well-being and the things that we measure in the success survey, we chose 10 factors that form 2 indexes. The first one we call the stress. And what's in that stress index are stress due to conflicts, stress due to frustration, stress due to life changes, and the student's reaction to stress. And finally, we also added in test anxiety. In the wellness index, we included the meaning and purpose, gratitude, engineering expectancy, mindfulness, and stress support. Okay. So we went through our survey, and we've given the survey now for 4 years in a row, and we pulled out the data. But first thing we thought we'd do is look at how do these indexes change within a student over time, so a longitudinal study. And it turns out we looked through all our data, we found that 28 students have completed the survey in 4 consecutive years. So they started as first-year students in 2017, and they've taken the survey 4 years in a row. So over time, what we show here is the box plot of the 28 students. And you can see during their first year, they have a somewhat lower stress level. The mean level is about 4.4, and then that rises and stays about constant second, third, and fourth year. And then on their wellness scale, generally it's pretty constant throughout the 4 years that they've been with us. And when we do statistical tests across the different years, we found none of the year-to-year differences were statistically significant. Okay, so now I'll show you more of the cross-sectional data. So all of our survey over time. And this first one shows the stress index. And I'll give you, it's a very busy plot, so let me give you a little tour. We've given the survey 4 years, and each one is shown here connected by dots, but it's not meant to show time or development. It's just showing within each year, the students who were first-year students, second-year students, third, and so forth, who took the survey. So for example, down here in the light blue are the data, the surveys from 2018. And in that year, we only gave the survey to first-year and second-year students. And the numbers shown here are the sample size. So 372 first-year students took it that year, and 53 students took it. 53 students that were second-year students took it. Okay. And then 2019, and then 2020, pre-pandemic, there's a 3 years, and you can see the data all cluster right around here, and generally show the same thing as what we saw longitudinally. Maybe a little bit lower on the first year, rises to a constant level, and then it if you stay longer than 5 years, you start to experience a lot more stress. That's what we're seeing in our data. And of course, I think all of you are staring at this plot up here and wondering what that data is about. And you won't be surprised. It turned out that there was a group of students that we hadn't surveyed, and we held off until April 2020 to survey them. And we found their stress levels were extremely high. So not surprisingly, when we shifted to online learning. And you might be asking, what about now? What about this year in 2021, when students have things have settled down, we have all become expert at online teaching. And that's this blue line right here. And you can see it does fall back to the general levels, maybe a little bit higher. We haven't done the test to see if it's significantly higher. Now I'll show you the wellness index, and you'll be really surprised. I'll give you a warning right now, and then we'll talk about it. So there's the same set of data for the wellness index, and all of you are staring at this data and thinking that a bunch of engineers must have gotten this data wrong. We double checked, and sure enough, during the pandemic, the onset of the pandemic, students experience extremely high stress, but they also experience extremely high wellness, which is surprising. We hypothesized that this feeling of high wellness resulted from the fact that students went home, saw many acts of maybe heroism even, and really were nurtured by their families, and really experienced this high wellness. You can see the other pre-pandemic years, 2018, 19, and 20, they are lower and about constant, just like we saw for the students that were studied longitudinally. And finally, again, you might ask, what about now, 2021? And sadly, that's this blue line down here at the bottom, and that's during this academic year. And you can see that in general, the students are experiencing lower levels of wellness, and especially the first and second year students, extremely low levels of wellness. So that might be, these two might be groups of students that we really want to work with coming back in the fall. So in summary, we've extracted 10 non-cognitive and affective factors from our survey and grouped them into 2 indexes to measure wellness in our students. The cross-sectional analysis showed that all the students experienced extremely high stress, but also extremely high wellness at the onset of the pandemic. And then during the current academic year, students are experiencing slightly higher stress and lower wellness, especially our first and second year engineering students. Okay, with that, I think I will stop and take questions.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Chen. We have just 1 minute left for any questions. Your findings were certainly interesting with both stress and wellness. I think that was, I think, surprising to me too, that students felt well, but you came up with a good rationale for that. I'm not seeing any hands raised, or does anyone want to make a comment or question in the last few seconds? Anyways, well, thank you very much. I think that's really interesting. I'd say it was a little shocking for me to hear that engineering students have a culture of suffering and shared hardship. I have a son who is a Cal Poly engineering student, but anyway, so that's there's probably many disciplines that might feel the same way. So it's quite interesting.
If Peggy, if I could, I want to give a shout out to Michelle Kurfs and Jocelyn G. They're here. They did all of the work. I just asked them for analysis, and they put up with me and did all of the hard work, the many hours of analysis behind this. So thank you to them.
Great. Students as well?
Yes,
Yay.
from statistics.
Oh, great. Wonderful. We're happy for that. Happy for that student participation.